a vast amount of abuse cases that have gone unprosecuted, and I can tell you that a lot of those cases are client-to-client issues. They are developmentally disabled, and a lot of them are looked at. I personally have submitted at least 3 cases on one specific client to the district attorney's office, and all 3 cases were he denied or declined to prosecute due to the fact that the person's developmental disability of the disability and the victim's disability also. There was no way to determine who started what, and it was a serious situation, but we were able to investigate it, come to a conclusion, and again, it was the district attorney's office in Riverside County that declined prosecution. However, again, I can say that in our facility alone, I would say that our clients are safer inside our facility than in some of the group homes that I personally have seen throughout the Coachella Valley and the Riverside area. I have been, as yourself, sir, I've been to many group homes, and I have seen some that are right on the mark, and I have seen some that could be called into question for exactly why are they into this business. But I believe, just to answer your question, I believe that their safety is above standard in these facilities.
Okay, I mean, it was, again, just trying to understand, I mean, often when people come here, it's kind of highlighted, and people sometimes bring an agenda, and the agenda is, I want to achieve X, and so in order to do that, I have to paint, the picture that the world is about to come to an end. I mean, if I believed half of the things that I've heard come through here, the world probably should have ended at least 10 times already. But
my presence here is a couple different things. The first of all, it is to look at some of the things that were written in that article. That reporter took certain information and he ran with it. There's many things in there that are in error, and was it his fault? Maybe not, because he was not allowed to have certain information because of HIPAA rules, because these are medically related clients. I just want to point out that I've been doing this job for 10 years. I started out as a uniformed police officer in uniform for approximately a year and a half, and then I transferred over to the investigations division. In that time, I can tell you that we do respond in a timely manner to these cases. We do investigate. I cannot speak for every single investigator or every single case, but I can tell you that the type of investigations that go on in my facility and the facilities that I have worked at, and I can tell you that we do respond in a timely manner, and we do complete thorough investigations. I've had numerous calls from local law enforcement asking me their advice or my advice on how to help them, because they're conducting investigations in the community dealing with developmentally disabled folks, and they have no clue how to start. And I've been able to give them some advice as far as how to talk to them, how to communicate with somebody who's nonverbal, what are the type of signs to look for. I don't believe that getting rid of our agency is going to fix anything. I believe that, like the recommendations that have been made, there are other ways to fix. We've done enough surveys, we've done enough, inspections of everything going on. Let's get everything from the top fixed. Let us do our jobs. And I believe that you're going to see that we are the agency that we claim to be.
Senator Emerson.
I'm sorry.
One question for just a general comment from you. If the Office of OPS were required to report directly to the chief and not to the commanders at each facility, would that be an improvement, or would you find that not to be so?
Well, if the commanders at each facility were independent from the administration, then we think that the investigations reporting to the commanders and then the commanders reporting to the chief of OPS in Sacramento would be fine. We think that would be a sufficient system. However, if a case is going to be sent out to the DA or to local law enforcement, the commander at the facilities have to get clearance from an administrator in order to do this. And we don't necessarily believe that that's the proper functionality or the right way to go. Like as I said in my testimony, we believe that the commander at each facility should be much like a precinct captain at your local police department. They should have the ability to send something to the DA. They should be able to run their precinct as they see fit. So the guidance should come for policies and procedures from Sacramento in terms of a general safety net and a general safety structure. But maybe that position should be a cabinet level position appointed by the governor. Maybe that should be, somewhere independent from the director's level or somebody who's concerned with licensing. But keeping something that is, this structure is the right structure. I absolutely believe it is if it is implemented correctly with the proper leadership.
Okay, let's.
But be careful. I mean, I don't know that you want to create law enforcement fiefdoms, to take one of the earlier person's testimony. I mean, in the LAPD, the precinct commander is not a unilateral operator, and the decision that makes, for example, a filing to the DA for a case that occurs, say, at 77th Division, isn't made by that precinct. I mean, there is a filing agency within the LAPD, and they make that decision based on a standard. But I don't think that you want to create the same kind of fiefdom that someone described earlier at each of the facilities. But I think, the challenge will become, I think, going forward, just as we're looking at going from 5 to 4, and if the number of people in the agencies, much as occurred with the Youth Authority, if you're looking at a dwindling population for whatever reason, then there comes a point at which, on the economy of scale, how much do you continue to spend if the population, just as in other things, if you get rid of a single patient, the cost of running the system doesn't go down proportionally. If you got rid of 100, you wouldn't be able to divide the cost by 100 and reduce it. And so because we're continually losing people, the cost per patient and the economy of scale is going back. Now, that's not the function of what we're talking about today, but ultimately that'll be the dynamic. For example, to Senator Emerson's question, if the population is going down, is 93 officers too many? If you close one of the facilities, you only have 4 left. If one of them is forensic, it becomes a management question that we'll probably be looking at in a budget committee format. But the thing I think we want to ensure the public, and it was why I phrased the question the way that I did, is that those 1,800 people who are currently in our care are safe.
Right.
And we want to be able to assure people, notwithstanding all of our administrative issues, that those 1,800 people today are safe. We could improve the law enforcement function. We can improve a number of the things, but we have an obligation, certainly those of us on this side of the table and those of you who provide the direct care, to make sure that those 1,800 people are safe. And then the other people have the issue relative to the standard of care and the other things, and we'll deal with that later.
And I agree with that, Senator. But I think one of the things that Ms. Morrison said that really needs to be incorporated as well is the, in terms of the abuse practices that have happened, is the tracking of the staff that have been hired, that have been cited for abuse before. I think that's one of the biggest things that can be done to help eliminate staff from being promoted or transferred from different facilities when they've had a case of abuse or something reported. And I think it's not just a law enforcement function, it's a cumulative total of things that need to be done in order to make this a great operation to work for.
Okay, thank you very much, panel members. We appreciate the discussion. The last panel is Terry Delgadillo, who is a director of the Department of Developmental Services. Welcome, Terry. So, you've heard things that are going on and
Yes.
recommendations from many other people. And let's begin.
Yes, Madam Chair, and I've asked Patricia Flannery, the Deputy Director of the Developmental Centers Division, to join me based on all the questions today, in case you have questions. But I am Terry Delgadillo, the Director of the Department of Developmental Services. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today to ensure the protection of the residents in the developmental centers. The Department provides services to 250,000 individuals with developmental disabilities under the Lanterman Act entitlement. The health and safety of the people we serve is our highest priority, regardless of where they live. 99% of the people we serve reside in the community and receive services through 21 regional centers. The department operates 5 healthcare facilities that are licensed, including 4 developmental centers, and they serve approximately 1,800 residents. They've been placed there by the court due to their significant medical or behavioral needs. Services in our facilities are provided by licensed medical staff, including doctors, nurses, and psychiatric technicians. With the emphasis on community integration, the use of the developmental centers is rapidly declining. New admissions are limited to individuals who have been involved with the criminal justice system and those who are a serious danger to themselves or others. Unfortunately, people with developmental disabilities are at greater risk for abuse in our society, as you've heard from many of the testifiers today. Any case is unacceptable. Any case of abuse is unacceptable, regardless of where the person lives. Law enforcement in the community and in the developmental centers are often challenged to make arrests that lead to prosecutions, especially when the investigation involves witnesses who, due to their disability, have difficulty communicating what occurred. To provide protection and security for the residents within the developmental centers, the department employs sworn peace officers, as you've heard today, that are certified by the State Peace Officer Standards and Training. This internal law enforcement unit is charged with promptly responding and investigating incidents that occur at the facilities. While they function similar to local law enforcement, members of the police force also have special skills, as you've heard today as well, to deal with the unique needs of the people they protect. The department's law enforcement services have been under scrutiny for many years. As Mr. Sims mentioned, he was involved with an Attorney General's review in 2002. I've not met Mr. Sims before and look forward to talking with him, but I have reviewed the report that they've completed, and we have implemented a number of their recommendations. The most significant is that we've restructured law enforcement. We do not, when Mr. Sims came in, they had law enforcement at each developmental center. They reported to the Administrative Services Director at the developmental center. We've restructured it so law enforcement reports to law enforcement and it comes up through the chain of command. In 2008, after a number of concerns that I had arrived in 2006, we issued a very, very strong zero tolerance policy. And in addition to the training that the staff get that's required by law, the mandatory reporting training every year, we also, with concerns you heard earlier, were very concerned that you had staff that may have moved between different state agencies, between different developmental centers, when there were allegations, and if they weren't prosecuted, you didn't find evidence. I mandated that every person we hire, that you have to go look at their personnel file. Also, anybody where there's an allegation of abuse, when the allegation is made, we immediately remove the staff person from all client contact. They do not have any client contact until they're cleared. If they are not cleared, we fire them. and we do not compromise. We do not settle and let them quit without having something in their file. If somebody resigns or retires before we have an opportunity to actually dismiss them, we place an open investigation in their file, so anybody looking at their personnel file would be able to see that when they retired or they left the agency, there was an open investigation into abuse. I think this has had a significant impact. The other thing that we did is that we made sure everything's being reported to licensing. So every allegation gets reported to licensing, whether it is an allegation between two residents where one resident indicates another resident has threatened them or hit them, or an allegation that involves staff. Over the last 4 years, a number of policies have been put into place. However, I still had concerns regarding our law enforcement operations. And we did, as you heard earlier, asked the national experts to come in 2010. It was not to conduct a review. I believe we do have a review. I'm not looking for an additional review. What I'm looking for is implementation. When we invited them in, we said, we want you to develop state-of-the-art protocols for us. Actually fix our protocols and give us training to train those officers on the protocols. We have the protocols now from the consortium and the training modules we expect to have shortly. The protocols clearly define the roles and responsibilities of the police officers, the investigators. It makes it abundantly clear, as California law requires, when we find an incident, it says when you report to law enforcement. I was a bit surprised by the union representative who indicated they're not notifying law enforcement. I think, as you heard from Disability Rights California, like in all the death cases, she has evidence where she can see that that did indeed occur. The protocols also deal with evidence collection, standardizing all facets of the investigation. One of the big concerns when I arrived at the department was how slow the investigations were being completed and the thoroughness of the investigations. There was mention that they were getting reviewed. They were getting reviewed because what was coming up wasn't thorough enough for us to be able to move forward. So we did put into place additional criteria, and the new protocols that are coming out will go even further. And we're really hopeful that that will bring us to a level that will have respect of everybody, because obviously there's still a number of concerns. In addition, we will be putting into place an automated incident tracking system. One of the things that was mentioned here today that continues to be a problem that was identified when the AG came in, when Mr. Sims came in, was the difference in reporting that happened at all the different developmental centers. They were all individual, how they sent stuff up, how the information came. We have a new system that will be online shortly that will automatically enter into an electronic system that not only will be at the developmental center, will be able to see instantly at the state level, and we'll be able then to monitor everything to see, do we have a trend here? Is there something going on? We have too many people that, have bruises in the same residence. Are they hitting something? Are they tripping over something? The other big thing that was recommended by the consortium was for us to look at having the investigators not report to the commanders, but report directly to the chief and headquarters, and we do plan to restructure to do that as well, so that if there's any concern that the commander who's also overseeing the law enforcement that are providing the security, or if there's any concern that the developmental center executive director is interfering, hopefully that will be addressed, because the investigators will report to their supervisor, who will report directly to headquarters. As you heard earlier, to further make sure we've done everything, I and many of you I've worked with very closely over the years, if there is something we're not doing right, we want to fix it. I asked Disability Rights California to come in independent of us, and you heard earlier they conducted an independent review. They've made recommendations to us which we will implement. We believe that they're very helpful recommendations to us to make changes that'll make a big difference, and we will be reporting more to them. And we believe also we are reporting extensively to the Department of Public Health now. I think you heard some indication today that we report everything. So if there's an injury of unknown origin, if there's a bruise on someone's shin and we don't know how it got there, we report that to licensing. And I think we need to keep working with all of our partners. We obviously want to make sure that they focus on the most serious incidents, but we also don't want to think that we're not reviewing cases. So all deaths and serious injuries are reported to outside law enforcement now, and that's the law, and I believe we're following the law. I look forward to getting information as well, whether it be anonymously. We did ask the union to please give us information so that we could look into it, because we want to make sure that all of us are following the law. Acknowledging that there is a need, though, for organizational improvement, Secretary Diana Dooley has secured a nationally recognized law enforcement expert to oversee the restructure and improvement of the Office of Protective Services, implementation of the protocols, and completion of the training. Again, I'm not looking for somebody to review. I'm looking for somebody to come in with extensive experience and make sure that we fully implement this and we get the system the best we can. Joseph Braun, who is here with me today, has over 43 years of direct law enforcement and consulting experience in the policing field. He served as the founding director of the Office of Community-Oriented Policing in the U.S. Department of Justice under President Clinton and Attorney General Janet Reno. He has also been the police chief of the city of Hayward, a federally appointed special master to provide oversight and monitoring in Cincinnati, Ohio Police Department, and the California Attorney General also brought him in as a consultant to monitor the implementation of reforms at the Riverside and Maywood Police Department. And the added benefit, we're so fortunate, is that Mr. Braun is personally familiar with the people we serve. His son resides at Fairview Developmental Center. The health and safety of the people we serve is our highest priority. Anything that we can do to address problems, we want to do it. So if there are things we need to change, if there are ways we need to be doing it different, we really look forward to working with you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Terry. Questions from members?
I have two questions. The 2002 report that I discussed with Mr. Sims, have you seen that report?
I've read every page.
Okay. And was it directed to the department?
It was directed to the Attorney General's office at the request of Senator Chesborough at the time, and it was provided to my predecessor, the director at the time.
And can you give me some indication on the number of recommendations and the status of the implementation of that?
There were a number of recommendations in there that we have implemented. First was that the law enforcement division have not report locally to an administrative director, that they report into a law enforcement chain of command, that they be post-certified in doing so. That restructuring was done before I arrived. The second thing that the report recommended was that when they did that, to do a contract with the CHP and bring in somebody at the beginning to run the organization. That was done. When I arrived at the department, there was a contract with the CHP, the person who was the chief at the time. The contract ended after 2 years, and I think that's where we did run into some challenges. We recruited for a new chief, and unsuccessfully, we put somebody in an acting role. We then recruited again for a chief, and we hired an individual. Unfortunately, as you've heard, we have subsequently terminated him, and he is the subject of a disciplinary action and court action currently. In addition, they recommended that we have evidence collection, make sure all the officers had evidence collection. We have done that. We increased the number of law enforcement. We had about the same actual number of people, not just positions. We have more positions today than we did, but we have about the same number of law enforcement people today as we did back then, and our population then was close to 4,000. Today it's about approximately 1,800. We had 7 facilities then. We have 5 facilities today. We do, all DCs meet daily to review their incidents. That was another issue that was there, that there would be standard protocols for referring to the DA. We do have that. That is in place, and it is being further refined. That training, that everybody had to be post-certified. Now, one of the things that I did early on when I got here because of concerns that I had is I said that we're not going to hire anybody and then train them, because you can hire them and have 2 years for training. We, since 2009, only hire people that have already had post-training, which is 660 plus hours of law enforcement training if they come in as a law enforcement officer. We put in a number of policies which I can go through. We have MOUs with outside law enforcement, which was recommended. We do pre-hiring background checks. They recommended we contract out. We did that. We do such. We did change duty statements. Things we haven't done. One, it recommended we give them firearms, and we have not provided firearms. I'm very concerned about the population that we serve. One of the issues that came up that I think is important is many of the people that we serve, again, they all came to us via the courts. The court has determined that at the time they needed to be served in the developmental center. Many of them have very serious behavioral problems. oftentimes behavioral activity, they act out against each other. They may act out against a staff person. One of the issues that I think that the union may have been referring to is that when you have a situation that involves two consumers and the consumers are very seriously disabled, sending them to the DA to prosecute them, the DA is not going to be able to do so. They've been very clear about that. And locking them up in a padded cell, we had a situation recently where they recommended the person had very, very, very severe autism. Sending them and locking them in a personal cell would not have done anything. They came to us because of the fact that they have behavioral issues that place themselves or others at risk. So I think that there has been some issues there. That is one of the issues that I think you heard. I do think that there is a need for more training. I really believe that the more training we have, the better we're going to be. The request for training, as I understand it, came just in the last 2 months. We've just finalized these protocols. We're going to be providing over 40 hours of new training on all of the protocols to all of the law enforcement officers. If additional training is needed beyond that, we will definitely do that. I can go further, but we've implemented a number of the recommendations, and I look forward to meeting with Mr. Sims and talking about how we can go further.
Okay, I appreciate that. My second question has to do when an investigator from OPS is on a case, and has there been incidents where those investigators have been relieved of that investigation and that case turned over to another investigator?
I'm not aware of a specific case. I am aware, and I don't know if what he is referring to. We have asked as well for examples, not because we're looking for the problems. We're looking to figure out how to fix a problem if it exists. But the cases that I'm aware of where there has been an issue of concern is that we have said if you're involving a consumer-to-consumer incident, that before you refer to the DA, you do need to consult with, and we have a group at agency that, not at the department, that actually looks at it, so that like the individual where I mentioned earlier, putting them in a padded cell and locking them up is not going to help law enforcement. It's going to take up their cell. They're not going to get prosecuted. They came to us because they're incompetent or they've been determined by the court. So we're kind of in a situation where we have to figure out how to provide behavioral supports to the individual. So those are the only cases I'm aware of, but if there are others, we need to look into them because we do not want to taint the investigation. The investigations need to be completed. They need to be timely. That was a big issue when the Attorney General's consultants came in. I think we've improved, but I don't think we're good enough.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I just thank you very much for your testimony today. I know the whole process has been rather arduous, but I do want to, alert you that the 2002 DOJ report recommended about 27 recommendations, and you just ticked off maybe about 8 accomplishments, and so we do have a ways to go. And it's been a 10-year period, and I know you weren't here for 10 years, and so
it feels like it.
It feels like it, right. And I do know that there are more recommendations coming from the consortium group and also from disabilities group, that there is a whole panoply of changes that you need to just watch over and incorporate in some best practices here in California. We are all very concerned about the treatment of folks who are totally disabled and cannot respond in a acceptable manner. And just as this committee, it's I think I'm in my 3rd year. I don't know, maybe 2nd year. I can't remember. 10, right? It feels like 10 years.
10 years too.
So we will be monitoring your progress and hoping that the changes come quickly and are sufficient, because this is a very vulnerable population and it's just not acceptable. So saying that, we are going to follow the progress and get you in here on a regular basis to tell us what is going on and keep us abreast, so that I know we're under terrible budget constraints also. So it's going to be very creative about how we go about doing this.
Yeah. And just to add on to your point, it is a very difficult time. Fully understand that. I'm just wondering what would be an appropriate time to follow back up with the department when you start implementing more of the. If you could give some indication when you think these other recommendations would be implemented and give us some time frame on that, would be appreciated. Absolutely,
and we can go through the AG's report and tell you where we are with the status of each of the recommendations. I had more, I just stopped, but I can. I'm happy to go through that. I think the thing that'll be really important, we have the consortium training curriculum, which we're going to have imminently, and we have Joe on board, and having Joe get the training done in the next 90 days, get all of this stuff implemented. I really think that that's a good time to touch base and see where we're at.
Okay, 3 months.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
We'll take an update. Okay, thank you very much. Now it's time for public comment, and the audience is large today. We have 4 chairs. Please come forward and state your name and your concerns, or express your concerns, and we're happy to take notes and see what we can do here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for holding this hearing. I'm Greg DeGier with the ARC and United Cerebral Palsy in California. We're longtime advocates for the safety of people with developmental disabilities, including being the sponsor of your bill, the Crime Victims with Disabilities Act of 2010. Our members have let us know loud and clear that they're outraged that 10 years after the Attorney General's report, many of these crimes, as documented by California Watch, are still going unreported, unprosecuted, unpunished. Making OPS responsible to DDS has obviously failed. There's an inevitable conflict of interest that cannot be solved. We call on the governor to immediately announce a reorganization plan to remove it from DDS and put it under a state law enforcement agency, such as the CHP. We're not trying to blow up the box. We're trying to put it where it belongs, as in a law enforcement agency. We also call on DDS right now, today, to direct OPS to arrest every mandated reporter who fails to report. The problem of mandated reporters failing to report is something that we haven't addressed today, but it's a huge one. In the case of Van Ingram, the death of Van Ingram that the California Watch report covered, for example, many of the people involved who did nothing were mandated reporters, who broke the law by non-mandated reporting, evidently. Our first request for legislative action is to move much more quickly to close all of the developmental centers. The state can and do much more to protect the rights of people while they're in there, but we can just the way these things are structured, we can never reach the level of safety that we can and must reach in the community. We've got a long way to go in the community too, but there's more hope, there's more possibility of doing it there than it is in these places. Secondly, the legislature in this year's budget should impose an immediate moratorium on any new admissions to the DCs, with the sole exception of criminals who are sent there for sentencing to Porterville. And the legislature should reject any efforts to pour any more money into the developmental centers. We should put the money into services, supports, and safety in the community so that no one ever has to go into these places again. My time's about up, so I'll just say that we also support all of the recommendations of Disability Rights California, and I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Larry Ingram. I am I can't sit down.
If you have something to share, the sergeants will.
Thank you. I need them to see this, that's all. Thank you. I'm Larry Ingram. The photo he's presenting to you was my brother Van Ingram. I was in law enforcement my whole career. I'm 61 years old. I ran the academy, still run an academy at Grossmont. I certified myself in the state of California. I have my master's degree in human behavior. And when I first learned about my brother's neck being broken, I took faith in the Office of Protective Services. I believed I was dealing with investigators. And quite honestly, excuse my French, it was a bunch of crap. I'm very angry. I apologize. I highly respect you folks, but don't be whitewashed by these people. You need to dismantle that organization. We spent 3 years, Donovan Jacobs, who was an ex-cop and also my attorney, 3 years putting the piece together, established that it was in fact a homicide, no two ways about it, and it was thrown in front of the bus and the case was dumped out because of how poorly OPS investigated the case. They didn't do an investigation. They took one Polaroid picture of his face being hauled out of the residence, and then Teresa DePue, a freaking RN, and Pete Masterson, a security guard who I thought were homicide investigators for the state of California, OPS, took over the case. And I'll always regret that. I'll always regret not doing more for my brother, not investigating our organization more. I really believe that I was doing with other fellow cops. They have no idea what they're doing, and you're wasting your money. You're wasting your money for that organization. Terry Delgadillo, bless her heart, she's right in on it. She's just as big a part of this. They blocked us right from the start. We with a tremendous hindrance from the whole organization, from DDS on down through OPS, and it took us 3 years to put it together, and finally the state tried to buy us off by giving us $800,000 to my 90-year-old mother, who's asking what happened. Why is the guy still working there? Which he is to this day, still working for Fairview Developmental Center when it occurred. Now, I came into this originally when my brother, had his neck broken, and I believed he might have slipped out of bed until I saw him in bed laying there looking like that, and I was horrified. As a cop, I knew that was not a slip out of bed. After all the experts, including a biomechanical scientist, the coroner, Fukumoto at the time, all said, hey, this is a homicide? No. They go, well, we can't really prove it. We can't show anything. Yes, you could, and yes, they could have. And the proof that we received $800,000 from my mother is proof that something went haywire. And OPS, I'm telling you, get rid of them. Reorganize DDS if you want. That'd be fine. But there's graft, corruption, cover-up at every level, and we learned that. I still have a complete belief in the system. I don't believe in the people that run it. It's very, very, very virus.
I hear your pain. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Donovan Jacobs. I'm also a retired San Diego police officer, and I'm also the attorney that represented Van Ingram and his family in the lawsuit against the state of California. And today, what I'm here to offer is a solution to the problem. And the problem is ineffectual criminal investigations that OPS conducts. And the solution is simply have local law enforcement conduct the investigations. I heard what Mr. Sims said, and I agree wholeheartedly with what he said, that there has to be a substantial change in how these investigations are conducted. I also heard what Ms. Morrison said, and I agree with a large percentage of what she had to add. I do disagree with the ability of local law enforcement to conduct these investigations. They receive quite a bit of training. When you're a cop on the street, you deal with people with developmental disabilities almost every day, depending on the beat that you work. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out how you're going to deal with them and how you're going to interview them. So with some additional training, these local officers can handle the developmental disability community. They do so on a daily basis anyway with the community-oriented facilities. So you don't need these special OPS investigators to deal with that community. Maybe some additional training with the local law enforcement officers, and you've got it done. How do you get that arranged with the local agencies? One, they already have jurisdiction. Under the law, they have jurisdiction to investigate crimes at these facilities. Second, you simply arrange an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, with that local agency. Most of these facilities already have some sort of MOU with them. So you put it back into their lap. And with the right amount of politicking, it shouldn't be that big of a leap. You're only talking about a population of, 1,800?
That's right.
And they're spread out in 5 facilities, 5 counties, 5 different community agencies. That is the quick, right solution to this problem. Now, I want to just, real quick, I want to talk about a dirty little lie that we came up with that kind of affects a lot of the opinions that you've heard today. And that dirty little lie is the way they report abuse in these facilities. They hide the abuse by using what's called a unusual incident report. It happened in our case, and we saw it in other cases that we looked at. Instead of using the state-mandated report form called an SOC 341 report of abuse. So instead of filling out a state form that goes outside the facility and goes up to Sacramento, they use the in-house form, this unusual incident report. Van's broken neck was reported as an unusual incident. But for Larry coming back in several days later and saying, wait a minute, this is an abuse case, I want an SOC 341 filled out, that's when this whole thing started. But for Larry, Van would have died a pauper, buried in a pauper's grave, and nobody would have known that there was an abuse case. But for Larry coming in and making sure everybody knew this was abuse. So Forget about the bureaucratic BS you guys just heard today about OPS can do this. Forget about what the union reps were telling you, because everybody here, most of this panel, was concerned about their jobs, protecting these facilities, because as long as these facilities are open, they keep their jobs. They get a little bad publicity. Maybe they fall into the budget cuts, and the facility's gone and their job's gone. That's why they have these dirty little secrets. That's why they're up here politicking and bringing in more experts and doing all that, consultants and all that BS. No, go with the local agencies. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Dwight Stratton. I'm president of the ARC of California, and more importantly, the father of a woman with developmental disability. Thank you for holding this hearing today on this very important topic. As a father, my first reaction to learning about the abuse in state institutions was, like many others, anger. Just as it is every time we parents hear of the crimes that are committed against our children, no matter where they are. For people on the outside, it feels like an unusual event, but for families, it is a constant fear whether we are aware of it or not. The fear comes from knowing that at an early age, our children are bullied on the playgrounds, teased on the school buses, and restrained and isolated still in classrooms. We fight for them to be included in society like everyone else, and maybe someday everyone will have an experience of knowing our children and not seeing them as separated from society, making them easy targets as devalued citizens. Many parents, especially from my generation, institutionalize their children from an early age because the doctors told us to, and because of this fear. But as we know now, the institutions can be an even more dangerous place to be. As the leader of the ARC of California, the largest association of people with developmental disabilities and their families, I urge you to put pressure on the administration to ensure that all allegations are looked into and answered thoroughly, that all perpetrators be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, and all those who knew of these crimes and abuse must be held accountable for their silence. Our sons and daughters are not throwaway people. They are loved and admired by their families and friends and supporters, and deserve to be treated with respect, and we will not rest until there is a satisfactory and significant remedy to this obvious systemic debacle. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members, Dwight Hanson on behalf of the California Disability Services Association, here to associate our comments with those of the ARC. First and foremost, we also are shocked to hear these stories, and our hearts go out to the family members and to the consumers. Frankly, our heart goes out to the consumers that are still living there. If something bad happens in this building, it goes to the building in 15 minutes. When abuse happens in an institution, you know that those consumers are all aware that something has happened. It must be horrifying to see somebody walking the hallways, whether it's a patient or a staff member, who they know is involved in something like that, but they never see anything change. They don't get fired. They don't get removed from their position. It's a horrible situation. We have a lot of places to go with this situation, and there were some remedies talked about today, but unfortunately, most of them, I think, missed the point. The reality is we have 1,500 people remaining in these institutions. We are going to spend $559 million. That's $364,000 per bed, per person. That's $1,000 a day per person. We don't have a resources problem. You heard the director talk about post-training. That's extensive training. If an officer went through post-training, they know how to secure a crime scene. They know how to bring in forensic teams to investigate those. It doesn't take additional investigation and training of the staff to teach a trained law enforcement person how to investigate a crime. And yet we spent a lot of time today listening to additional need for training. There really is only one solution. If you look at these institutions as a box, we've cut some very little holes into that box where those of us on the outside can look in and see what's going on. Unfortunately, those boxes have been very, very small. What was described today was a very limited expansion of those boxes, but the proposal is to still have it totally internal, where the folks at DDS are running the show, where the individual regional centers don't have the access to consumers that they do in the community, where the developmental center investigators are owned and operated by the state of California. They're afraid to report. All those issues that were brought up in earlier case would continue to exist as long as the developmental centers continue to exist. We're not talking, as has been characterized in the past, about pulling a van up, dumping the people in, and taking them dumping on the streets in Sacramento. That's not what we're talking about when we talk about relocation. But it took 6 years to close Agnew's Developmental Center with only 300 consumers living there. There's only 300 people living in the Lanterman Developmental Center. At the very least, we're talking about 2 more years. At the rate that we're closing these centers, the last guy in, 15 years from now, will cost the state $559 million. The caseload went down by 12.3% this year. The expenditures in the DCs went down by less than 2%. We're putting enough money. It's just misplaced. We have a wrongful process here and a wrong service delivery model. Institutional care is, in fact, institutional care. It's every bit as problematic as nursing homes or any other thing in the community. We don't condone crimes or abuse against people with disabilities, no matter where they are. But the investigations cannot continue to be an internal process and expect any different outcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Terry DeBell. I'm representing the families from Lanterman, Porterville, and Fairview Developmental Centers as president of CASH PCR and co-president of the Parents Coordinating Council of Lanterman. We really appreciate the committee having this hearing and hearing the background, the work of the panel members, and hearing the department address the current standards and improvement, and to get some context on the actual cases of injury and abuse that were out there. I also wish to say the pictures that people have spoken about, particularly the prior speaker, on developmental centers does not fit what we know as family members of developmental centers. These are the places where our family members are, because that's where the services and supports are that their IPP calls for under the Lanterman Act. This is not a budget issue. Also, if abuse was only isolated in one area, wouldn't that be great? You could take care of it very easily, but that certainly isn't the problem. We depend upon developmental center care for the very lives of our family members, and we believe that that life can be a very good one, certainly free from injury and abuse, a life filled with respect. As was brought forward by several panel members, the injury and abuse of that, it's not isolated. So we agree with Disability Rights California that this is an opportunity for some systemic reform. And the families of Porterville, Fairview, and certainly Lanterman, many of whose children will move soon to a community setting, would welcome that. We would do everything we can to support and assist in this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. My name is Kathleen Miller, and I'm a little nervous, okay?
That's okay.
I'm a parent of a young man who lives at Sonoma Developmental Center. I'm also president of the family association there, so I'm here to kind of give you a different perspective. I also want to say I worked for 7.5 years in the center at Sonoma as a psychiatric social worker. So I kind of know what goes on inside some of those units, okay? I want to start by debunking some myths that I think might be out there about the families, okay? One myth I've heard is that we care more about saving the centers than we do our loved ones. Nothing could be further from the truth. If there is abuse going on, we want to know about it. We want to know about it first, and we want it taken care of. But I also want to add that we're for transparency, not just inside the centers, but outside the centers. And we don't always feel that's the case, okay? The second thing I want to say is that there's another myth out there that the reason we keep our loved ones in the center is because we don't know what exists in the community today. It's really wonderful. That's not true either. I have a conservatee that lives in a community home, and it's one of the brand new Agnews homes. I know what services are out there. I know even about supported living services. I choose to keep my son in the center because I think he has the best quality of life there, period. I think he's safest there, period. He has lived in the community before on a couple of occasions. It has not gone well. Many of the families who have their loved ones in the center have had the same experience, okay? And I want to acknowledge that I'm not saying that mistakes are not made in the center. I mean, I think that this is a healthcare system. It's a big system. And we're talking about people who are totally dependent in some cases for every single activity of daily living. They're a vulnerable population. Mistakes are made. And sometimes they have tragic consequences. And that happens even in the centers. I'm not going to lie. However, I want to add that the centers, like everywhere else, have been subject to severe budget cuts and severe downsizing. And I think those two things kind of add to the mistakes a little bit, or to the possibility that mistakes are going to be made. I mean, let's be realistic. I mean, we've been cut just like everybody else. And, well, I will come back to that. I also want to say I'm usually a numbers girl. I really like statistics and data. That's kind of how I operate. And I've looked at the numbers, and I've seen that there are all these cases of what I would call incident reports and reports of injuries that are sort of unknown origin. From my experience when I worked in the center, I just want to say it this way. Every injury or event with even the potential to harm a client does get reported. And that report goes up the line. It's an incident report, okay? Some incidents that are reported as abuse probably would not be reported as abuse at all centers. There isn't uniformity. I think we've already heard about that. Our licensing agency at the center has strict standards for reporting for Sonoma, and the standards, I don't think, have been all that uniform. So what that means is you can't even compare numbers from one center to the next to the next. Then if you go outside the centers to the community, the reporting requirements are different still. If you have rules in a DSS home, those rules are totally different. Those reports, as I understand, go to the regional centers initially. I don't know what happens. I'm not talking about police response. I'm talking about reporting, okay? The other thing I want to say related to that is my concern isn't who gets prosecuted, it's prevention, okay? I'm a parent. I don't want this stuff happening in the first place, okay? So not only are the numbers kind of not real helpful and sometimes useless, I think what happens when an incident occurs inside the units where the clients live and breathe is that the teams get together and they talk about these incidents and they plan preventions and they put them in place. I don't know about the police response, and so I'm not going to talk about it. But I know what happens inside the units where the clients live and breathe. And when things do happen, we tried to deal with it. I've already talked about the fact that our parents want transparency both inside and out the centers. I want to say a few things that I have tried to get some more information about what happens to our movers when they leave the centers and they go to community homes. It's been a struggle. I've done public records requests. They haven't always been answered in a timely manner. I have a concern about that. If you guys can help me with that, I would really appreciate it. They know I have this concern. I've shared it. I have some pending now. I have tracked the deaths inside Sonoma Developmental Center for years. The deaths at Sonoma are 3%. They have been 3% year after year after year. So then I started looking at the deaths of Agnews movers in community homes. Okay, we're talking about deaths. and these are good homes. I mean, they're good community homes. But in 2010, the death in those community homes was 5.56%. In 2011, 4.9%. So the deaths in those community homes for Ag News movers are exceeding the deaths inside Sonoma Developmental Center at this time. And I think you can talk all you want to about abuse and how bad the centers are and everything, but we families know that the centers are keeping our folks alive longer. Okay?
Kathleen, let's wind it up.
Pardon?
Let's wind it up.
Oh, I am. I'm gonna finish. Okay. So I just wanted to say a couple of suggestions for courses of action, which they've already suggested, is that you standardize reporting more among the DCs so you can get those numbers have some meaning for you. And also, I want to hope that you are going to support families as advocates. That doesn't always happen, but I think we're the ones that aren't paid. You know, we're the ones that are in it for a lifetime commitment, and we're in it for the long haul, and we're in it because we care. So,
thank you.
I'm done.
Thank you very much.
My name is Steve Johnson. I'm an advocate for individuals with special needs. I was very involved with the Ag News closure and, of course, continue to be involved with those consumers as they transition to the community. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak. I will be very brief. I just wanted to say that I had the unique opportunity as an advocate to see both sides of this coin, to see the services that were delivered within the developmental centers and see how that compares to the 475 people that moved out during the Ag News closure. I will say that I completely support the lady from Disability Rights California and her assessment of the situation. Those people have their finger on the pulse, as do the families. People who are peeking through holes and see the developmental centers as a box don't really know what's happening on the inside. There are good quality services within the developmental centers. The OPS is monitoring those cases, incident reports within the centers. And then when people move into the community, there is no centralized monitoring service, if you will. You can call health services, but we've already heard that they don't respond quickly or efficiently. And typically in the 9 counties in the Bay Area that received Ag News clients, not every one of those police departments had adequate training or comfort level with doing investigations within the care homes. So you can make suggestions, say, well, we need to improve the community investigation process. Absolutely. But at this point, the experience I have with both sides of that coin are that the developmental centers do a much better job currently of investigating the situations. And I think you heard some great suggestions today on how to address the deficiencies.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Jackie Dillard-Foss, and I'm representing the California Supported Living Network and providers across the state of California that do supported living and independent living. What I want to talk about is when abuse occurs in the community. When that happens, we have an SIR that goes to our regional center. We also contact APS. So I had heard the conversation in regards to APS's response. If there's any assumption, we have the police, as I heard Mr. Wright talking about. They are there immediately. They come to the home of the person and they do a report. I think that the issue that I'm having from the provider aspect is it's a conflict of interest when you say, I'm going to police myself. What I appreciate, I want to protect the people with developmental disabilities in the community, but what I want as a provider is that someone is going to hold me accountable as well. So you have the regional center who will come in immediately. You have APS who comes in immediately. The police force within our area, we have spent time to educate our police force. They are becoming more responsive. That's the education we need to have happen. And I think the concern becomes, as we're listening to all this conversation, all I hear is, let's throw money at the problem. One of the conversations that we had at the Lanterman Coalition, Art Bolton, who was obviously someone very involved with the writing of the Lanterman Act. He said, it's been 40 years. When is it finally time to say we're done? The community is able, we're there, and we're willing. And we're going to, does abuse happen in the community? Yes, it happens in the community. How we respond to it is a little different. I have dealt with the police force personally when things do happen. And I think that we are spending so much time. I heard the Developmental Center family say that they've had budget cuts. I don't really know what those have been as I see the cost rising in the Developmental Center. But supported living has seen many, many individuals with the label of unique challenges, with autism, with dual diagnosis, with severe medical support needs. They are successful and they are living in the community. And you know what happens when a staff does something that they don't like? That person fires them. That's how it should be. If I'm a person with a developmental disability and I don't like you, you get fired. You may just get fired because I just don't like you and you move to somewhere else. But if I have any assumption of abuse and this happens statewide, you are removed. That's it. We've got to get rid of the conflict of interest. When you have the police force at the developmental center, it just doesn't make sense. And I also think that the other part of what we have to do, California statewide, is call for a moratorium on any future placements into developmental centers, and we have got to support our community. There's 259,000 people with developmental disabilities, and we spend a lot of money on 1,800 individuals. When is it time?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think there's a question from Senator Emerson.
Question. You mentioned the developmental, the regional centers are called in on abuse issues and all. What do they do?
When we have someone, when we contact our case manager immediately, the case manager will show up to the house with us if they feel like it's significant, the abuse is significant. We also have to call APS immediately. So APS will come to the house. They will come to the facility. If it's a group home, I don't know. I deal with people that live in their own homes. So APS shows up. The case manager will show up. If we feel like it's a police activity that we need to call, we'll call 911 first. We'll call 911, APS, and our regional center. So the case managers will come out and they will actually interview the consumer and talk to them individually. And so will APS, and if the police are involved, so will the police force.
So the protocol is you call the regional center person and then later.
No, if it's the severity of crime, if someone has reported that they potentially were sexually assaulted, it's immediate 911. You go right to the police force, and then you'll call APS and you will call your regional center. If there's an assumption of neglect, or the person is complaining about their staff and you're doing an SIR, or someone has run away from the home and you want to find out what happened, it'll happen that way. But if it's a severe abuse issue, you're going to call 911 and the police force are going to come out.
So that would be the individual who runs the home.
Well, in supported living, the person is living in a home of their own. So they live in their own home. So that would be, if the staff assumes abuse, they're going to call 911. It's all about the severity. And so the crime scene or whatever is their assumption is happening. We have gone with folks who say if there's a consumer and they say they have been potentially sexually assaulted by another consumer, we'll go with them. And the normal protocol that happens for any citizen of California happens in that case.
Thank you.
Okay, quick question. Quick.
No, quick. I think this would actually be for Ms. Delgado. We've kind of gone around, and I don't expect you to have it right now, but it would be informative to have the funding level for the department for, say, the last 3 years, and then try to, if we can, divide that out on a per capita basis. So we're looking at what is the actual funding. Did we cut it? If we did, how much? And how did that affect the per capita funding of the department?
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, subcommittee. My name is Tony Myers. I'm the state president for the California Association of Psychiatric Technicians. But more importantly, I'm a senior psychiatric technician that works at Lanterman Developmental Center, and I've provided services to the disabled for 29 years in that capacity. And I just wanted to take an opportunity to talk about some of the improvements I've seen over those 29 years. I've been active in the union for pretty much all of those years. And I'm one of the activists locally that would go to the investigations that were conducted. And when I started, there was one investigator per hospital. So those are substantial improvements that they made over the years, and those investigations are usually into abuse. And our organization believes that there should not be any abuse, and we don't condone it. And if we see it, of course, we have to represent our members through the due process, and we do that. Earlier, there was a comment about that people should be fired. I can tell you, people are fired. It's not that they don't get investigated and they continue to work. But our position is that they do go through the discipline process on a routine basis. It's not like everybody's turning the other way. We believe, there's been a lot of testimony here today about, community versus institutions, and I believe that our position is and will be in the future that developmental centers are a safety net, and that they should be something that's considered. And we believe that that there is an opportunity for it. And last, I'd like to say that we do support the disability rights recommendations, and we do believe that the OPS is appropriate to oversee the investigations into the institutions or the developmental centers, and with some of their recommendations. But one thing, I know it's about investigations here today, but one thing that I, as a psych tech, wanted to mention is part of our job in helping these individuals in the centers is to provide them with training, and I think it's an instrument that we've used in the past that, they have the ability to go out on the grounds and walk around, and part of that training is that they know that peace officer's car is something that's safe. So it's part of a training technique for us too.
Okay, hang on. Senator Emerson has
Sure.
a question for you.
Over the 29 years that you've been there, how many recommendations has your organization made to make improvements in the DC Center?
Well, it's actually in the DC Center in itself, or in investigations. Is there something specific?
About improvement in the providing of service at the DC.
Well, Senator Emerson, I can tell you, it's an endless list. I mean, we're always battling on staffing. We're always battling on, improvement in training. We file grievances to make sure that our members get the training that's necessary. I'm sure with Mr. Murch and myself, we could put together a lengthy list that will help you with that. But one other thing, one area that we have made a request is in our contract. We actually have contract language that helps the department, we hope, and it's language that talks about the length of time it takes to complete an investigation. We have 75 days that we want them to complete it within, so that we can get our members back. It reduces overtime. It provides the consistent quality care that's there.
Yeah, well, the reason I asked the question, you said you supported disability rights recommendations. Have you made recommendations similar to those over the years?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, and I think the departments have responded. I'm not going to throw, Terry under the bus today.
My name's Ken Murch. I work with the Psych Techs also as a consultant, been with them about 20-some years. Senator Emerson, we've done a lot of things. We went to the bargaining table to try to negotiate language to speed up investigations, to get quicker decisions. We've also been really big on continuing education programs. Part of those continuing education programs is how to handle stress. We've been supportive of EAP programs so individuals won't lose their cool and maybe get in a situation where they would assault. Staffing ratios through the Board of Vocational Nurses, psychiatric technician, licensed examiners. We've supported stronger requirements to revoke licenses in the event that there has been abuse. But let me make one point. I wasn't even going to testify, but I really believe that people in developmental centers are safe. But it's a very expensive program. There's no question about it. But the number one reporter of abuse in a developmental center is the nursing staff. We have a 24-hour period where one shift comes on, another shift goes off. And they're constantly scrutinizing the health and safety of those patients. There are various diverse groups of our people. No one's doing any covering up, because you may have a shift coming in that doesn't even know some of the people on the other shift. Their number one concern is the patients. Why you have so many allegations of abuse is the way they're trained. This document right here, 9 pages, is a document that's used in a developmental center to develop policies and guidelines to prevent abuse and reporting abuse. And one of the main tenets of this document, it says this: you must report abuse or what you reasonably believe to have been abuse. And a lot of times caregivers are conflicted when they see something happen. Is that abuse? Is it not abuse? And not all abuse is physical. There's psychological and other forms of abuse. So they have to report this. Now, one of the gentlemen testified that all mandated reporters who do not report abuse should be fired. Well, believe me, the Department of Developmental Service has fired them. Go back and look at the record. We've even had, and then there's talk about, well, there's conflict sometimes between an investigations report and the administration. We found out many times that the investigator's report says this incident was unsubstantiated. But the administration will go ahead and take an adverse action against that individual and basically said, we're going to put those allegations before a state personnel board judge and have a hearing on it. When that is done, simultaneously, that adverse action goes to the licensing board, and that generates another investigation by the Board of Vocational Nurses, Psychiatric Technicians. Now, there's times that a person could be exonerated by the state personnel board but lose their license because they've been found guilty of abuse or neglect by their licensing board. So there is levels and levels of protection. Now, my brother had a developmentally was disabled. And my emotions would be no different than this family member here if anything ever happened, would have happened to him. Fortunately, he never was. We were able to work with him at home, and he progressed and become a wonderful, productive citizen. So I can understand that side. But you have to realize something. There is a lot of dedicated healthcare workers out there, licensed professionals, whether they work in the community or work for the state. And the reason that you have a lot of abuse allegations is that you have a very, very system of accountability there that goes on 24 hours a day. And as Mrs. Morrison said in disability rights, we have to look at the overall system. It's broke. Senator Wright, you indicated you may want to close out to developmental centers. But the issue of how you scrutinize and report and investigate and prosecute abuse will not go away. It's just going to be multiplied thousands of times. So as a state of California, you're just scratching the surface on this issue. And the developmental services and the developmental centers is good to look at because there's no system in the state that represents the disabled that has a better system of reporting abuse, a better 24-hour surveillance of abuse, and even though there may be faults, they do a pretty good job of investigating these abuses. And are people in the developmental centers safe? We think they are. That's a very small percentage if you look at the statistics that disability rights indicated. But we want none. Right. And if we have a caregiver and a licensed psych tech that is abusing someone, we want them out of the system. It hurts us no different than when a rogue cop goes rogue or one of our soldiers goes rogue. Right. It hurts the profession. And the best way that we can protect the developmentally disabled is not to let that happen, because that erodes the services that are given, whether it's in the community or whether it's given by a developmental center, and it hurts any professional person that works in that area.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ken. You have a question? No.
Oh,
okay.
Mr. Senator.
Thank you. I think we have to move some chairs here. Good afternoon.
Hi. You have to excuse me for a moment. I'm a little shaking, a little nervous here. Okay. Well, my name is Nathaniel Tucker. I've been living in Sacramento for over 11 years now. And there has been a lot of talk today, that's obvious, about things that people are doing to prove stuff or whatever. I'm 29 years old, and I'm not afraid to say that. I have cerebral palsy. I'm not afraid to say that either. Okay? I was born in Texas, and I moved around a lot. And the part that Miss Terry, because I'm just confused, because she put 500 people that were in, like, programs and put them back in state hospitals. My question is why? Why? That man that represented for his brother, I guarantee you one thing. If that was me and I was in the state hospital, my family would be totally outraged. Just like how he was, my family would be the same way. I don't understand how can you put people that are disabled in a hospital when people don't care. They don't care. You hear so many negative things about how they're being treated. We need to be out there in the community like the rest of you guys. Like all y'all that are walking, we need to be out there too. Have a job. Some of us has families, kids of our own, or whatever the case may be. I don't understand how is it possible to put people with disabilities back in state hospitals? I don't understand it. I literally don't. Because anyone who believes that that is the safest place in the whole entire world is out of their freaking mind. Personally, look, I understand that you have a lot of time, okay? I mean, not a lot of time, because you got a lot of people that need to speak. But all I'm saying is, Miss Terry needs to talk about those people got sent back in state hospitals. She's talking about, oh, we're doing this, we're looking into this, we're looking into that, we're looking into this, we're looking into that. Personally, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Because I work with people that have disabilities of all kinds. Not with just cerebral palsy, but some have autism. Some have even worse. But I've seen the people that I work with day in and day out. They're answering phones. They're cleaning up. They're getting out there in the community and getting jobs. They're doing what you guys do. And I mean, literally, that makes no sense that they are back in those places. So I hope and I pray to God, literally, that someone has some form of a brain that would say, close these state hospitals down, because they don't need to be in there. They don't need to be in there. I don't know what it's like. I've never been in there, but I guarantee you if I probably was, I'd probably be isolated or treated worse or treated badly. My mother and my father raised me to be out there in the community and do something. I'm 29 years old. I ain't get hit by a bus. I ain't get hit by a train. Okay? I was born this way. Born this way. Okay? So all I'm saying is, look into that. Okay? Look into it.
Thank you, Tucker. Thank you very
much. Bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi. Press the button. Oh, there you are. It's okay.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank you, Senator Liu, and the committee for convening this hearing on such an important topic so swiftly. My name is Elizabeth Cates, and I represent the ARC, the Association of People with Developmental Disabilities, and their families. My husband and I are the parents of a 30-year-old son with a developmental disability who lives at home with us. David attends Placer ARC Adult Day Program in Roseville for 6 hours a day and is with us the other 18 hours. His poor communication skills, level of functioning, and lack of judgment necessitate 24-hour supervision for him. For 30 years, we have coordinated our daily schedules so that one of us is always with him. This, plus an excellent day program, enables him to remain at home and in the community. I read the newspaper reports about the California Watch investigation with a feeling of overwhelming sadness for the victims and their families. When we read an article like that, as parents, we think that could be our son. I know the focus of today's hearing is on the developmental centers, but consider this. In 2011, we learned of systematic sexual and physical abuse in Los Angeles involving multiple victims, a tragic fire at a group home in the Monterey area that claimed the lives of all 5 residents, and the pregnancy of a severely disabled woman in Penryn that was evidently not discovered, according to the news reports, until her pregnancy was well advanced. The recent deaths of a mother and her son in Sunnyvale highlight how the loss of resources for our community system has put people in jeopardy. I wonder if my son could ever end up in a place that cannot care for him or even keep him safe. I point this out because my belief is that no one should live in an institution, and one solution is that we should be moving people more quickly into the community. However, it is also clear that there are problems in the community. Our child has always lived at home and will continue to do so, but I fear for his future as each year brings more cuts and erosion of the Lanterman Act. Despite my son's disability, his health is good, and it is logical to assume he will outlive us. After spending our lives trying to give our son the best possible life he can have, it is terrifying for me to think about the kinds of abuses he could be subjected to simply because he will outlive us and have to rely on the developmental disability service system to care for him, a system that deteriorates each year. We need solutions that are inclusive of, responsive to, and integrated throughout our entire system of services and supports. A starting place of zero tolerance is good, but it has unfortunately not resulted in 0 instances. As a mother, I would hope the goal is 0 incidents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Lynn Frampton. I'm a medical case manager at an agency here in Sacramento called STEP. Earlier today, I was sitting in the back with my friend Olaf. Olaf is also a consumer for STEP. He's been there for probably 17 years. I met Olaf in Sonoma Developmental Center when I was sent on a referral to assess him to see if he was prepared to move out. We didn't have much of a conversation that day. He's deaf, and he also has very low vision. He only has one eye because a few years previously in the state hospital, he was stabbed in the eye with a fork, and he was heavily sedated the day that I went to see him. I was really afraid for placement in the community because I felt if he needed to be sedated that much that he probably wasn't a good candidate for the community. However, successive times of seeing him, it kind of brought me around. I want to tell you that he's been highly successful. He wanted to talk to you today. He wanted to talk to you about his experience. He had to go. His experience of living there. He was placed there at the age of 9 because he was a hyperactive child with low vision and deafness, and the school removed him physically from his parents' home and put him there. Although each year he could attend Fremont School for the Deaf, at the end of the school year, he was returned back to the state hospital, and that went on until into adulthood. I wish I could tell you that case was special and unique about the horrifying things that happened. I asked him today, I said, what happened to the person that hurt you? And he said, nothing. And I can't, what can I say to you? What can I console you about? There was an earlier comment today. I did say that I was a medical case manager, and I often write political letters, and I come and testify, and I like these matters. I feel living here in Sacramento, it's my responsibility to speak for people with disabilities that can't get up to the Capitol, and so I take that very seriously. And in my research last year, I found an article written by the AMA where they said that people with developmental disabilities were living within 5 years of their normal counterpart's lifespan. And they attributed that specifically to community placement and them having access to all the medical care and all the good things that we have, and rightfully so. So I think that we all know the door is closing on the developmental centers. He said it already today. It's been 40 years.
Thank you. Okay.
Good afternoon. My name's Stacy Sasson, and I also represent Strategies to Empower People, STEP. I am also a social worker and worked for Sacramento County for a number of years, as well as El Dorado County with First 5 Children and Families Commission. What is so surprising and appalling to me after what I've heard here today and the things that I've learned about the developmental centers is that as a social worker, in every environment that I worked in, whether it be with First 5 or APS or CPS or IHSS, we were held to very, very strict high standards of mandated reporting. And we were not policing ourselves. We were policed like anybody else out in the community would be and should be to report abuse and neglect. And I really can't fathom how these things are continuing to happen when we're currently spending $1,000 a day to warehouse people with developmental disabilities in these developmental centers. The Lanterman Act has provided for these people to be in their communities. They have a right to be in their communities, and yet we still, 40 years later, have them in developmental centers, experiencing abuse and neglect that some of us can't even possibly fathom. And yet we see the successes every day. I do now, especially being with Strategies to Empower People, see these people living in the community and thriving and working and being contributing members of society and being happy. And you talk to them about their stories and they'll tell you. There are horror stories that some of them have from the developmental centers, and ask them if they want to go back. You saw the passion from the young man that was sitting next to me that gave his testimony, and I can assure you that the passion that you would see from some of the people that we support would be exactly the same. They would not want to go back. I have, and I'll leave this for you, I brought this. These are people that STEP currently supports or has supported that have come out of the developmental centers, and people that are thriving in the community. They have a lot in common. They all have developmental disabilities. Some of these people were told that they had unique and difficult cases and would never be able to be integrated into society. But thanks to the support of Alta California Regional Center, who is our regional center, we've been able to get these people into supported living situations, and they are thriving. And so I've got some of their stories here for you, including Olaf's story that Lynn just told you about and some others. And another thing that all these people have in common is that each one of them has one or more multiple stories of abuse or neglect that they had inflicted upon them in the developmental centers. So I would just encourage you to realize that throwing money at this problem is not going to solve it. We're already spending $1,000 a day to warehouse these people there and to have these stories of abuse and neglect time and time again come to light. I'm not going to tell you that abuse and neglect don't happen in the community. They do, but we're held to a higher standard. We're held to the mandated reporting standards. We don't police ourselves. And so I would just encourage you to please don't look at it as a problem that can be solved by throwing money at it. It's not going to help. We can't train people to have morals and higher standards and ethics and integrity. It just can't be done. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for holding this hearing. I'm so grateful to be a part of it as well. My name is Phil Benet. I'm the Executive Director of the Alta California Regional Center, which serves a caseload about 10 times the size of the entire caseload of the developmental center here in Sacramento and in the surrounding counties. We work in partnership with the Department of Developmental Services, and I'm grateful for their leadership on many issues, including the issues that Terry has related to regarding the closure of the developmental centers. And I support every possible strategy that can be taken to hasten the departure, the safe departure of people from the developmental centers into their communities. And in fact, my community-based board of directors next week is going to be considering a motion, adopting a motion to, and perhaps starting a policy to ban developmental center admissions for all Alta California Regional Center clients who are not involved in the criminal justice system. And I think it's really important when you talk about developmental centers to separate the one part of Porterville Developmental Center that serves people who have been involved in the criminal justice system and for whom the alternative is typically jail or prison. And I have been to most of the developmental centers. I have helped hundreds of people get out of developmental centers and live in the community in my career. But I think that Porterville Developmental Center serves a very different function from the rest of them. So I just want to support the department in their efforts to hasten the departure of our clients from developmental centers into the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. 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 There.
Hi. I didn't expect to speak today. My name is Jerry Lettridge Hardy. I'm the sister and co-conservator for a young lady that's lived at Latterman Developmental Center for over 40 years. When the news broke these articles about the abuse and abuse, specifically in DCs, my heart at first sank because I thought, here we are going to be once again having to defend my sister's home, because that is what Latterman Developmental Center is. And again, I wasn't prepared to speak, so excuse me if I jump around a little bit. I thought, here are the DCs, really a utopia for a disabled, for anyone that really knows about DCs. There's certainly a tremendous amount of money. There's available for services. There are career staff that are many licensed and educated specifically to follow this path. And yet, here they will be targeted because they collect data, because that data is turned into reports, and because it's available under the Public Records Act. When Disability Rights California, formerly known as Protection and Advocacy, testified, I frankly was shocked, because I know they are real supporters of foreclosure of the DCs. They believe, their philosophy is that they should not exist. And when the woman shared with you all repeatedly that this abuse, the monitoring the abuse, reporting the abuse, the best situation is in the DCs, not in the community. I was grateful, but I'm puzzled that even after the federal and state-funded organization designed to advocate for these citizens, the only folks that I believe can see records that aren't blacked out are looking at you all and saying there's a big problem system-wide, that I still find myself sitting and listening to a lot of folks who condemn DCs, condemn them as institutions. My sister is severely autistic. She will pull out her hair until she's bald. She will bite into her arm until it's bloody and is now scarred. She has broken my mother's nose. She has pulled us by the hair. She is a person who loves to go to dances and walk to her school, but she has severe behavioral problems. The idea that one size will fit all is ridiculous. Right now, we are being asked to look into community care where there isn't the data collection and there isn't the reporting that's required in DCs. And I'm going to be expected to place my sister, who has no ability to describe, point out an injury, describe how it happened, or if there was a perpetrator. And she never will be able to. The only way I can protect her is by surrounding her with the most qualified people that again really care about her. So, and to finish, I guess for me, I always say, if you will not acknowledge someone's limitations, you can never celebrate what their abilities are. So if we deny that my sister is as disabled as she is, that she has the limitations that she does, we are going to force her into an environment where she will not be safe, where she will be hit by a car, or where she will not attend dances and not attend church, that, you know, her life will be incredibly limited as a result. So I just hope that we don't walk away today without really a commitment to every single disabled person in this state who are being neglected and abused, and no one is protecting them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Short public comment.
You just heard from my older daughter about the life of my younger daughter. And I just have to say a couple of words because...
Please introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mary Kettering, mother of Brenda Lettridge. She's a resident of Lanterman Developmental Center. And Gerald Lettridge Hardy is my other daughter. But 40 years of inside the works. I've seen everything at Lanterman. I remember the day when the client's rights advocate had to ask the executive director for permission to advocate for a resident. So we've come a long way. We took that position away. At any rate, the developmental centers are going to be extinct. And in doing so, there is a level of population of disabled people, such as my daughter, who unfortunately, believe me, unfortunately, will be at risk being in a community, or she will be in an environment in a community which will be far more institutional than the institution that you describe Lanterman as. Lanterman is itself a village. As any of you who've ever been there cannot deny, it's a village. It has every amenity. It has theater, it has churches, it has hospitals, it has... she goes to the canteen, she goes to her school, all of those things that you know of. The thing that I want to speak to is the staff, and I believe my daughter addressed the fact that the reason we have the documentation, the reason that I'm grateful for the reporting on the abuse in the center. I'd like to see an equal examination, a real thorough examination of the tracking of abuse, the reporting of abuse of clients as they are dispersed out into group homes. And I'm talking about not the professionally run, but the mom and pop operations, and there are many, where the home operators hire the totally inexperienced people and pay them minimum wage. And what I would like to know is, what is the method of tracking those people? And Leslie Morrison referred to the centralized investigative unit that's been created in Massachusetts to oversee the care and safety and abuse and injury of the residents there in the state of Massachusetts, and I really think that's a serious thing. Another thing I think would be very important information for you folks is to talk to the people that are in the psychiatric hospitals in the counties throughout California, and the police departments who receive the calls from these group homes. I know what's happened to a friend of mine's child. The woman dumped over a table, frightened the minimum wage caretaker, who was totally inexperienced with developmental disabilities. The caretaker called the police, the sheriff, and they hauled her off to the county hospital. And we are going to be transferring costs. We're not going to get away from the costs of caring for profoundly disabled, especially those with behavior disorders. They simply require more, much more. They're not going to be out there with a job. There's no way. There is no way. They'll be lucky to be very lucky, and that's our prayer, is that we can find an environment where my daughter will be safe, physically safe. Her activities will be limited, but maybe she'll be physically safe. Now, you tell me that's not more institutional? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Well, I really thank the audience for persevering here. It's been a long day. We have lots to think about, and we're going to be sure to monitor progress here. So, any other comments from members? All right. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.